Early cinema's identity is inextricably linked to other art forms. From a strictly technical perspective, the illusory nature of cinema relies on trickery. The manipulation of one's brain is triggered through a desire to create an ongoing sense of visual continuity through the combination and repetition of moving frames. The first narrative feature films share many of the same techniques employed in theater, where the staging of the image itself assumes a static nature. Cinema's emergence heralded the rise of many non-narrative films, which were short subjects often released within the silent era. Eventually resulting in the birth of actualities, this category of film focuses on capturing realism reminiscent of prose or poetry. A viewer could picture the image depicted by the film if it were described in written form due to their short and straightforward nature. While larger narrative feature-length movies would eventually follow in tandem in the 1920s and 30s, the pioneers of avant-garde cinema sought to unlock the innate potential of filmic expression contained within medium specificity. Garnering inspiration from the philosophical framework outlined in well-renowned artistic movements such as Dadaism and Surrealism, artists turned filmmakers like Marcel Duchamp and Hans Richter stripped down their works to the fundamental building blocks of film. Anemic cinema and Rhythmus 21 utilize light and time to create an experience that is only possible through the medium. René Clair's 1924 film Entr'acte is an example of the aforementioned and is considered a prominent example of avant-garde cinema and experimental music converging, involving the French composer Erik Satie, widely regarded as one of the pioneers of ambient music through his coined term furniture music. The notion of the two art forms coexisting arose. The soundtrack paired with Clair's visuals formed an accord and sensorial experience conjured through this specific combination. The work of American musician Benjamin Lasky, also known as Quadeca, takes a similar approach on sound and visual to the aforementioned. Before releasing studio albums, he produced YouTube content revolving around soccer, FIFA, and rapping before eventually releasing his first mixtape in 2015, titled Work in Progress. Quadeca's musical identity underwent a tonal and thematic shift with the release of his second studio album in 2021, titled From Me to You. The project was released in conjunction with a film accompaniment and is now the first of 3 visual albums in his catalog. From Me to You is the most minimalistic work in terms of both production and the use of visuals here, charting a clear stylistic evolution that fully manifests in his most recent project. Vanisher Horizon Scraper, released on July 25, 2025, and features maximalist production with an unbounded sense of ambition. Garnering ample praise from online music forums like Rate Your Music and Album of the Year, his devoted fan base has catapulted his acclaim further than ever. Quadeca's work draws from the avant-garde, and the line he strays between restraint and explosion is levied as a common criticism toward his work. However, to me, his ambition displayed in the project far outweighs any problems one would have with the purposeful discontinuity in visual or audible form. These tonal and genre shifts are why he is compelling as an artist to me. Before diving into Vanisher Horizon Scraper, it's imperative that we discuss his second album first, I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, which utilizes the storytelling capabilities of a concept album to a T. Just in case you're unfamiliar with the term concept album, the collections of songs in one often revolve around a narrative or reinforce a particular theme. In this case, the lyrics in I Didn't Mean to Haunt You depict the journey of a person who has passed away and remains stuck between Earth and the afterlife in a state of purgatory. Set in chapters that correlate with songs, the exhibition format reminds me of early silent film showings like Nickelodeon's. Cinema scholar Tom Gunning describes alternative modes of exhibition as surrounded by a mass of unrelated acts in a non-narrative and even nearly illogical succession of performances. Each chapter here relies on the relationship forged between the instrumentation and impressionism, and Quadeca appears in multiple scenes throughout the visual album as both a performer and in archival format. Acting is not approached in the traditional sense here, as he often appears without showing his face. When he does, he often breaks the fourth wall. This Brechtian separation between subject and actor removes the link found within the theatrical mode of performance, reliant on characterization, and the choice to elevate what Gunning describes as non-narrative variety that places this form of entertainment under attack. Aiming to transform soundscapes into non-narrative abstractions, visual albums work best when they conform to one's senses, establishing a rhythm that can contain a narrative without being defined by its traditional structure. This feat is achieved by one of my favorite early avant-garde works, Emlyn Edding's 1933 film Oramundi. The similarities between Quadeca's visual style remind me of the techniques displayed in Edding's work through the combination of interpretive dance and the landscape film. The visual ethos of I Didn't Mean to Haunt You stems from the album cover designed by Paige Pryor, which features hues of green watercolor that blend in vague outlines. Comparatively, if one were to compare the patterns based on the lines inside the painting, the result would be akin to a Rorschach test. In both the landscape film and visual album, time is deconstructed in a literal sense. Aura Monday and I Didn't Mean to Haunt You respectively slow down and speed up different scenes. Pryor's painting blends in with the surrounding landscape, with the ghost thematically enhancing the work, as long as you have the context of the concept, as Aura Monday does with its interpretive dance routine. In the Born Yesterday segment of I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, tapes are strung to Lasky's back, and the quality oscillates from clear to grainy to signify the changes in perspective. Old videos and everyday objects disappear and reappear. Mountains, lakes, and sweeping fields of snow change in coordination with the production of each song. Layers of sound are built upon folktronica-infused flutes and experimental hip-hop beats. Both I Didn't Mean to Haunt You and Aura Monday's cult status, alongside their lack of formal distribution, allow them to counteract what Gunning refers to as the conditions of reception in the cinema. The dark room, the stable rectangle of the screen, the fixed voyeuristic position of the spectator. Outside knowledge that applies to both the diegetic details of the film and Quadeca and Edding's artistic careers unearths a layer of introspection that extends beyond the traditional mode of narrative viewing. This aims to expand upon what scholar Thomas Elsaesser describes as compensation for the absence of a coherent diegesis and for the non-narrative organization in the filmed material. I'll draw upon various experimental films to contextualize the presentation that Quadeca employs in Vanisher Horizon Scraper. As a modern example of the landscape film, he utilizes the durational structure of the genre to build an ineffable atmosphere wrought with abstraction. Track 1, No Questions Asked. A white cloth waves in the wind. A lone figure prepares to set out for the open sea. The day rises, and the sail is scarred. He unknowingly wrestles with the wind. The sea is in view, finally. Its mist is indistinguishable from the sky and clouds. Notes, rhythmic with the harmonization of each step, ring true. The sailor is visible from every angle. The grass towers in waves, ready to meet the tide. We are introduced to our protagonist and the task that is set for him. Track 2, Waging War. Locations are dictated by the weather. A lighthouse rotates, gleaming with newfound palpable hope. A distorted heart spins, seemingly from a different dimension, hidden yet in plain sight. Quadeca further narrows this perspective through synchronizing the landscape with the rhythms of production. Gunning's concept of the cinema of attractions examines how early filmgoers were drawn to a certain type of engagement through spectacle and curiosity rather than narrative cohesion. This idea can be applied to Quadeca's style here. Sensibilities present within the positioning of the camera and fluidity of motion amplify the presence of the landscape. Present within the early Avant-Garde, the environment serves multiple purposes and is not relegated to a plot device that drives an overarching narrative. The trees and sea are never relegated to the background. Juxtaposing shots are used to convey a sense of impending consequence. This is representative of how the spirit championed by the cinema of attractions outlines the shift in spectatorship. An innate ability to sculpt emotion is achieved through the specific presentation of ideas, one that prompts a continued curiosity, where technical prowess paves the way for personal introspection. Quadeca's lyricism strikes a remarkable balance between storytelling and sonic immersion. Landscape films are often accompanied by an overarching theme, sometimes determined by the extreme. This can be extreme stillness, motion, or speed. The tracks on Vanisher Horizon Scraper are diverse in structure and contain multiple tonal shifts, mirroring the trials of a sailor at sea. However, the film is largely minimalistic in structure, establishing an identity similar to that of Franco Piavoli's 1989 film Nostos, The Return. A minimalistic take on Homer's The Odyssey, Odysseus' journey here parallels Quadeca's. Each character must embark on a quest to find themselves while attempting to grapple with past mistakes. Limited dialogue is used in favor of visual splendor, where the lack of subtitles in Nostos, The Return and the allegorical weight of Quadeca's more direct lyrics channel the same sentiment. Track 3, Ruin My Life. Track 4, Godstained. Our sailor is at sea, charting the gentle pulses of rocking water. A message in a bottle. Decrepit ships lie in the wake of the shore, revealing a collage of remnants from those who attempted the same journey. Nostos, The Return opens with Odysseus sailing, briefly showing a sequence of the Trojan War before he enters a cave. He is drawn to an unknown voice and hears singing, where a woman holds a seashell and beckons him to her. This is the only object visible amidst the darkness of the cave, including that of the surroundings, similar to how Quadeca's heart appears out of the blue in waging war, literally and metaphorically. Track 5, At a Time Like This. The horizon splits the earth in two, the open future is vast and seemingly unending, but the color will soon be rendered invisible by the sky. His rope is a thread that charts the winding path, but there's karma in the current when it's calm. The fortress is in sight. Monday presents the viewer with two environmental structures against the forces of physicality, waves crashing against the seaside and trees blowing in the wind. Reminiscent of early actualities, each shot never lingers on its initial subject for longer than a few seconds. A lone spectral figure is introduced between shots of the raging water. This juxtaposition here is what Gunning would describe as directly soliciting spectator attention, inciting visual curiosity, and supplying pleasure through an exciting spectacle. The figure sways erratically while maintaining a sense of grace, wandering through the lush scenery. The camera employs a ghost-like gaze, peering into the trees as if it were attempting to track down the figure. This mobile pursuit questions the spectator's sense of reality through the questioning of reality itself, which directly counters the notion of the voyeur commonly present within the theatrical notions of narrative film. We are unaware of where the sailor is heading. Cryptic symbols are present on his map. The rawness of the diary-esque camera quality in Ruin My Life is reminiscent of the seemingly mundane parts of the journey that appear throughout. The solitary power of limited control. The sailboat lies adrift on the sea, and he attempts to chart the impossible waters. Track 6, Monday. Darling, don't you give up on a Monday. The rocky camera movement halts. The cut disguises the passage of time. The memory of her remains, yet the seasons never cease to change. Return to routine, and the past is rendered familiar. The fabric settles on the ground, and what once was present is left behind. Ben Rivers' 2022 film, 2 Years at Sea, centers around a lone Scottish man named Jake Williams. He documents Williams' routine throughout the seasons. The viewer traverses through the isolated repetition of a singular daily routine. The familiarity of individual objects and movement becomes important in both works. The sailor's jacket, the rope, and the flag, each signifying a path in the journey toward impending catharsis. Track 7, Dancing Without Moving. Track 8, That's Why. Letting the wind guide our sailor, the vessel dances for him, the moon gleaming for all to see. The rope is too long, buried beneath the murk of the swamp. It's time to let go and float once again, for even the birds have embarked upon their journey. Sharon Lockhart's 2006 film, Pine Flat, and 2 Years at Sea, a tree camera movement as a tool to blur the spectator's notion of time. The durational qualities present in the slowest of landscape cinema serve as amorphous branches that connect to singular memories conjured through sense. The total stillness in Pine Flat is meditative and unchanging, while the staticky nature of the 16mm film grain featured in Rivers' work often overshadows the subtle, lateral bumps and camera tilts. Track 9, I Dream About Sinking. He believed the rope would touch the ground, yet it floats deeper into nothingness. The bottle's message becomes one with the blue. Sails submerge in sequence. Track 10, Natural Causes. Our sailor is alone. Somebody died on Monday. Under the surveillance of the elements, the call for help is marred by distortion. Continuity within the landscape film establishes itself through a natural rhythm that functions outside of the spectator's agency, working against the conventions of a narrative film. Locations in Monday and I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, a process enlivened via the cut. The background here is no longer relegated to being a part of the mise-en-scene, similarly to Vanisher Horizon Scraper. While there is no narrative continuity in this particular clash of ideas when placed against themselves or each other, an atmospheric resonance is crafted to open the spectator's mind to new possibilities. In traditional narrative cinema, pattern recognition is achieved through sight-based human perception, all revolving around one's ability to understand a narrative structure. Once this pattern is broken, the audience unlocks a different approach to observing light and time. The breaking of this immersion through a metacinematic lens is crucial to the meaning-making process within the coexistence of the audible and landscape, paving the way for individualization. Track 11, Thunder. Our sailor has made it this far, for his anger now shall triumph over the sea. Carrier of the commanders that rule over the sky, the clouds falter below him. Black and white flashes brimming with confidence, obliteration of the senses, safety is within the shore. Rudiger Neumann's 1988 film Nordlicht operates entirely on the organization of color when compiling its shots. The distinct palette on display here channels wonder, correlating a feeling to a hue. Jarringly snapping the visual style and tone, the grandiose sentiment of this track masks the unrelenting power of the ocean. The blues associated with longing and the passage of time before are nowhere to be seen in this segment, compounding the previous impacts of the smallest tonal shifts. Track 12, The Great Bakunawa. The grand hurdle is within the quest to conquer the sea and oneself. Omnipotence rises. The serpent is ready to strike, devouring the moon. The cross heralds a force, or is it the sea responsible for the creature, or is it something even larger? A strong contender for my favorite track on the album, sounds reminiscent of Japanese band Ground Zeroes' Consume Red, Belair following the droning of bird cries and glitch-based vocals. In Nostos the Return, a thunderstorm literally destroys the ship. Birds fly across the sky in sequence here. A small Ruin My Life callback, leaving him stranded in the water. The moon towers over him. Both Odysseus's and the moon's perspectives in the film are shown simultaneously. Here, experimental hip-hop stalwart Danny Brown continues his streak of featuring on Quadeca albums. He raps as a sentient form of carbon monoxide in I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, but this time does it from the perspective of a Bakunawa, a mythological Philippine moon-eating dragon. Music is part of the legend. It is said that the creature was lulled to sleep by it. Chalk it up to destiny. It must be fate that he's here too. Track 13, Foregone. Do you like what you've seen? All I can do is remain. The final moment of peace, a foreboding and somber acceptance, become one with the waves. Goodbye to a love that could have been, anchoring down before the final storm. A fervent piano ballad of sincerity, Foregone feels like a reluctant acceptance of the inevitable. Doré-O's 1971 film, Caudelon, holds this quality, a lamentation for a lived moment of uncanny beauty. We stay in one place until it all becomes too familiar. Locations do the talking for both our protagonists. Odysseus has been here before in Nostos the Return. He recognizes the woman tending to her flowers, the objects of his childhood. The tide is coming in for our sailor, however. The end is near, and only the thought of her is what remains. Track 14, Casper. The cloth is in tatters. Our sailor is succumbing to the elements. Among the elite bands to come out of the windmill scene, I was ecstatic to see that the Manchester group Maruja was featured on the track list. Harry Wilkinson's vocals on the song read like hymns from the deep sea forged by a primordial being. Reliant on the dialectic, opposites thrash in conjunction here. The converging of warm and cool, dissonant and calm, generate a controlled chaos. Herman G. Weinberg's 1931 film, Autumn Fire, is an early example of a filmic tone poem that prioritizes a thin narrative structure to elicit a raw emotional response rather than tell a complete, close-ended story. Both Foregone and Casper especially consist of a similar approach, seemingly assembled from what would be categorized as B-roll. The film assumes an identity by putting to use shots that would likely feature in the end credits of a narrative. Casper illuminates this notion, shattering the physical confines of the camera by submerging it underwater, thereby breaking the spectator's voyeuristic gaze. The sensual overload serves as an apparatus that challenges our desire for the continuity. The elements themselves are the protagonists now. You can also hear this in audible form when the camera rises up and down, coexisting with the notes that seem to go underwater. When short-term narrative ends are replaced with metacinematic tendencies, in Richter's case from earlier, moving frames of black and white within a larger singular black and white frame, and for Lasky, the continued acknowledgement of the spectator throughout his visual albums. Attention to elements that are oftentimes taken for granted here are pushed to the forefront. Weinberg utilizes editing to compare the transcendental nature of human yearning with the environments they inhabit. In silent film works outside of the avant-garde, characters take precedence above all else. Here, Quadeca strikes a balance between the two. The human subject in Vanisher Horizon Scraper also disregards Gunning's notion of a traditional protagonist bound to the whims of psychological motivation or individual personality. This is reminiscent of the Dadaist form, where physical associations are made through natural processes. In his memoir A Manhattan Odyssey, Herman G. Weinberg classifies the rain as a symbol of happiness on the screen. explaining how, despite the film's protagonists on paper being human, landscapes, cityscapes, and nature far outweigh the aforementioned in screen time. Although it would be physically possible to witness a person treading in open water next to a giant cross while looking at a perfect sunset, the chances of it occurring would be infinitesimally small. The audible and visual combination is showcased here through the depiction of Gunning's description. A unique event, whether fictional or documentary, that is of interest in itself. A break from reality occurs through the employment of dance, conjuring dissociative feelings spurred by the presence of a surreal subject in a realistic landscape. The technical prowess of the production, its prolonged yet earned catharsis within the final 3 tracks, results in a transcendent display of finality. There are a few moments in Nostos: The Return that pair wonderfully with the ending of Casper. When Odysseus and his crew set sail for the second time in the film, the constant use of perspective shift, in addition to the clashing of the cool and warm colors against the sails, holds an impressionistic quality similar to the final sequence here. When Odysseus ventures toward the light at the end of the tunnel, the previous shot, in which the moon is superimposed over the sea, finally reveals itself and its thematic purpose. Preordained from the start, he has already arrived at his fate. Skulls surround him and the darkness finally subsides. How many sailors came before ours? It's daytime once again and the pathway remains. His search will ensue for eternity. The blaring sun clashes with the sea, the sky. Elements collide in bursts of light and fever, and sonic obliteration takes aquatic form. Holding onto the rope, the notes bathe beneath the sepia tones. He lets go, yet the last of the light remains. Both the sailor and Odysseus attempt to fight time, the forces of nature, yet ultimately accept their fate. We never see the omniscient narrator, the Bakunawa, only their presence is here through the elements, channeling the perspective of Homer, where the gods reveal themselves in nature. Does faith fail in the face of power? He drowns and fulfills his fate. Both protagonists forced to self-reflect and possibly relive this all again. Part of me feels as if the sailor is the ghost from I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, where the ghost recognizes his prior fate. By committing suicide out at sea, the afterlife is not a place for rest for the sailor eventually, but an explanation. The cycle continues, with the last lyrics of Fantasy World from I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, possibly foreseeing the future depicted of the sailor in Casper. And I float mountains away, where no one can stay, and I go, not in a rush. Our sailor floats at sea or in the sky as a ghost, where he can never be seen again. He is never in haste, simply patiently waiting for what has yet to come, or in another world or lifetime, what has already happened. The universality of extremes, acceptance, reluctance, hope, faith, failure, the finality of everything. It is all laid out in Vanisher Horizon Scraper, and the sailor's journey is representative of all of us, not from a literal perspective, but one that balances and drifts between the colliding shapes of emotion. Quadeca strikes a balance here, chronicling a complete audiovisual odyssey doused in an authentic desire to innovate. The rise of the visual album is a modern example of contemporary cinema's capability to reinvigorate the medium. Gunning describes the potential of Avant-Garde to possess enthusiasm for this new medium and its possibilities, and disappointment at the way it has already developed, its enslavement to traditional art forms, particularly theater and literature. This structural self-referentiality births a new method of production and spectatorship, where stripping away inspiration from written material makes way for a combination of the sonic and visual. Crafting an individualized experience through means of unrestricted communication is dependent on a reliable balance of both the amorphous role of the human performance and the atmospheric quality of the landscape. The cinema of attractions and the avant-garde both offer modes of perception that vary from that of conventional cinema, enriching the appreciation of the everyday experience of vision. The early avant-garde does not reduce the technical quality behind its production, but instead works to retrain the gaze of the spectator on every sensorial level, marking the medium's shift toward a self-referential structure and diverse style of exhibition. Vanisher Horizon Scraper is uncompromising in its vision, championing the best aspects of avant-garde, encouraging the viewer to appreciate the journey. The moments that are in between are all that remain. I encourage you to form your own thoughts on Quadeca's work. All of his films are free and available to watch on YouTube, and I highly recommend watching them in order. If you'd like to go above and beyond to help support the channel, my Patreon is in the description, my Instagram is cinema to the max, and you can follow those for posts that introduce these thoughts outlined in the videos. Thank you very much for watching, I truly appreciate it.